Okay, so good morning. And again, for the record, I will wish Moshe Mazel Tov on the new grandson. Terrific to have another member of the Jewish community, and may he grow Torah chuppah u'masim tovim. So we are at the two dots, fourth line from the bottom of Menchep on Mabet, and today is Daf Memtet. Today's Daf is Memtet 49. We will be, God willing, finishing Masechet Sotah, and God willing, tomorrow, we don't know days off, I guess, except possibly Yom Kippur and maybe to a lesser degree Yom Kippur, but Tisha B'Av. But in any event, we are. This is an exciting day, but there's a lot to cover. So where are we? What have we been doing? Well, we have been discussing the ramifications of as I put here, we've been reminiscing about the good old days and how things aren't as good as they used to be. In particular, since the destruction of the Beit HaMikdash, some unfortunate things have happened, and so we're going to continue that discussion right now. Okay, so the Mishnah had said, right, upasku anshe amana, that again, when the Beit HaMikdash was destroyed, there ceased to be people of faith in Israel, and so now the Gemara is going to discuss who they are. So Amar Rabbi Yitzchak. Rabbi Yitzchak explains, Elu b'nei Adam shehein ma'aminim ba'akadosh baruch hu. The people of faith that we're talking about are people who put their faith in Hashem. The Tanya, because we have a brisa that explains this exact idea. Rabbi Eliezer Agadol Omer, Rabbi Eliezer the Great said, Kol mi sheyesh lo pas b'salo. Anybody who has bread for the day, bread in his basket. Va'omer ma'ochel machar. What am I going to eat tomorrow? And the person says, "Einu elam tane amana," meaning, that's a person that doesn't have much faith. Because the bottom line is that what we need to have is we need to know, that if God has provided us with something for today, so Hashem will provide us for something for tomorrow. That we don't need to, that we shouldn't spend our time worrying about that kind of question. Now, it's interesting. A couple of thoughts that I want to just mention on this, or specifically one thought. It highlights that, it's the worrying about it. That worrying about when we don't have is not helpful. Going out and doing something about it, it doesn't say that that's a problem. Indeed, that may be we're required to do. Of course, there's the famous joke about the person who said God will save me, and from the flooding and etc. And a boat, and a person knocks on his door ahead of time, and the person says, God will save me, etc., etc. And the ending. And then, of course, they comes to Hashem, and Hashem says, well, I don't understand. Why didn't you send me? And Hashem says, I'm the one who sent the guy at the door, and the person with the boat, and the person with the helicopter. You got to take, So in any event, the bottom line is that we also have to, it's a partnership. We have to do what we can do, and then Hashem will do the rest. But the point is that worrying about it is the thing that is being criticized here. Right? Eino ela miktane amana. And so these people that say, what am I going to eat tomorrow? They are the ones who have little faith. And this is what Rabbi Elazar says. What is it written? Ki mi vaz liyom ktanot. Now, this is a pasuk from Zechariah, where it says they are the ones who are derisive on the day of small things. So that's a very cryptic statement. So Rabbi Elazar explains, Mi garam latzadikim sheyis bazbeis shulchanan la'asid lavo. Who is it, or what is it, that causes tzadikim to have less on their table in the world to come? Katnut shebahaya behen. It was the smallness that was in them, shelo haminu b'kadosh baruch hu, because they didn't have faith that Hashem would provide for them. So Rava Amar Elu Ketana b'nei Yisrael. Rava says no, that doesn't have to be the interpretation of that verse, but rather this is, and we take a look in Rashi, the last Rashi Now, Rashi on this daf on Mem Chet Amud Bet is on both sides of the page. So this is the last Rashi on the left-hand side of the page, which is the very end. So Katane Rashe B'nai Yisrael Shemesu Kashem Katanim. So if you have a child of an evil person, of a wicked person, and that child dies young, that is what this verse is referring to. As we turn to Mem Tet Amud Aleph, Shemivaz Bezin Din Avihem L'Asud Lavo, because what they are really doing, what the death of that child is doing, is it's lessening and tearing up the sentence of their father's judgment. How so? Because Omrim Lefanav, these unfortunately deceased children can say before God, Ribono Shalom, God, me'achar she'ata asid lifarei mihen. Once you're going to say that you're going to pay back the wicked in this world to come, lama hikisa shneihem bam. Why did you hit, blunt their teeth in, with us, with them, with the death of their children? So the point is that the death of the children will save them from the full ramifications of their actions in the world to come. Okay, so now that we mentioned this, and the idea being, the statement that highlights the diminishing of a negative outcome, we're going to make two other statements by Rabbi Allah Bar Yevarechia, who also, these first two statements also touch on that same theme, that something happened to prevent a worse outcome. And then we'll have two more statements by Rabbi Allah Bar Yevarechia, and so we'll end up with four such statements. So let's go through them. So statement number one, Amar Rabbi Allah Bar Yevarechia Ilmale Tefillah Social David Hayu Kol Yisrael Mochei Revav, that if it weren't for the prayers of David HaMelech in in Tehillim, we would all be peddling stains, Revav. Now, what does that refer to? So Rashi really helps us out. Third line, the right-hand side column of Mem Tet Amud Aleph. Revav hu davar ma'os. That is a disgusting thing. Kigon chalev v'shuman, like different kinds of fats. V'nidbak b'begadim, and it stays in your clothing, meaning it stains the clothing. V'nim asin, and it becomes disgusting. V'ein lecha adam misasek behem elo ani, and the only person who's going to work with those items is somebody who's poor, because it's going to get into their clothing. They're going to have to deal with it. So the only people who are going to, want to be involved in it are people who have very little clothing and don't care about it getting dirty because it's already dirty and disgusting. So that's, and how do we know all that? Shneamar, Shisa Hashem Mora Lashem, that Hashem should give them mastery. So, and earlier in that verse, Rashi explains this, that earlier in that verse, it says, Kilola Netzach Yishkach Evyon Tikvas Anavim Taved La'ad. That the point is that if that we don't want Hashem to forget the poor, and the hopes of the poor, will be lost forever. So the point is that this idea is that David HaMelech is asking that they be given some wealth, and that way. Rashi explains, it'll cause the non-Jews to show some respect to Jews, demonstrating that the non-Jews, are not the sole proprietors of wealth and power, as it was really given to them by Hashem. So that is statement number one of Rabbi Allah. So statement number two, V'amar Rabbi Allah bar Yevarechia, Ilmale Tfilaso shel Chavakuk, if it weren't for the prayer of Chavakuk, we would have only one cover for two Talmidei Chachamim, meaning that in one cloak for two Talmidei Chachamim, they would have to huddle together to keep warm. Shneamar Hashem Shamati Shim'acha Yuresi Hashem Pa'alcha B'Kerev Shanim Chayehu. That Hashem, I have heard your tell of your power. I'm awed. Hashem, your actions of your prior actions arouse once more in these years. Now, Al Tikra B'Kerev Shanim, don't say that it means in these years, Ela B'Kerev Shnayim, but when two people come close, meaning that it's highlighting that you need two people to come close to be covered by one blanket because of their poverty. But thankfully, because Habakkuk offered this tefillah, so as a result, that is how they were able to. It's we're fortunate not to have be that poor. Now we get a third statement from Rabbi Bar Rechia, and he says the following: Shnei Talmidei Chachamim. If you have two Talmidei Chachamim who are traveling, and they don't talk Torah between them, they deserve to be burned in fire. Shneamar, Vayehi Hema Holchim Halok V'Daber V'Hine Revav Recheb Eish. That when it talks about Eliyahu and Elisha walking together, it says that they were walking and speaking, and it appeared to them a chariot of fire. So the Gemara explains, Taima de Ikadibur. So why weren't they burned by this chariot of fire? Because they were speaking Torah between them. If they hadn't been speaking Torah, so then they would have been deserved to be burned. So that's statement number 3. And finally, the fourth statement. If you have two Talmidei Chachamim who live in one city, and they're not able to reach an agreement on the halacha, and so as a result, there's a machlokes between them. Echad meis ve'echad gola. One is going to deserve to die, and the other is deserving of going into galut. Shneamar lanus shama rotzeach. That when it comes to one who murders by accident, we say that the rotzeach is going to run to one of the asylum cities. Asher yirtzach es reyehu b'vli das. That a killer can flee there who is killed, without recognizing, without knowledge. Ve'ein das ela Torah. And the point is that the knowledge that they're missing, is not simply that they didn't realize what they did, but effectively that if in fact they lack knowledge, they lack the Torah, they lack the ability to reach a compromise and to understand how to be agreeable with one another, well, then that's somebody who is going to be having deserved to be exiled, and the other person is going to be deserving of having died. So that's how they tie this to this concept of being of two chachamim who are not able to get along. Then how do we know that knowledge is Torah? So because my people are mute for lack of knowledge, meaning they have forgotten. And then the pasuk continues to say that they've forgotten the Torah. So it clearly das is referring to Torah. So, okay, so now that we've had these 4 statements, we can have some additional statements that deal with poverty, because the second of the statements of Rabbi Law dealt with the poverty and how we shouldn't be so poor that we should at least have one blanket per person. So also the first 2 statements. You're absolutely right. So Rabbi Yehuda Brei the Rabbi Chia.
All the blankets have room.
Yes, that's the point. We want to make sure we have a blanket for everybody, that we shouldn't have to share, because it's nice to have your own blanket. So
pillows too.
What? Pillows too. Absolutely. We have to have, we should have pillows too. Otherwise, you're not going to be able to go to sleep. So 100%. So although I will note that there's a Gemara elsewhere that talks about how 6 Talmidei Chachamim were able to share a blanket. And that highlights how they all and the answer that Rav Chaim Shmulevitz explains in one of his sichot, that the concept there is that that each of the chachamim in that situation, in that story, were all more concerned about everybody else, and that if in fact you are more concerned about the covering of somebody else than your own covering, then when 6 people get together in that situation, they can all be covered, because they're all more concerned about covering everybody else. And so as a result, everybody has a sufficient amount for them to feel comfortable. Yes, 100%. We should teach that to Congress. So, all right. So, I'm a Rabbi Yehuda Brei the Rabbi Chia. So again, we have this concept of about learning Torah and poverty. So now, the reason that I referenced the second one is because we're talking about Talmidei Chachamim. So, Kol Talmid Chacham ha'osik b'Torah mitoch hadchak, that anybody who learns Torah in a case of adversity, namely, specifically if one is poor or a disadvantage in any way, well, tfilaso nishmas, then their prayer will be heard. So if you have a prayer, that's the time, after you learn Torah, that's the time to share the prayer. Shene'amar ki am b'tzion yeshev Yerushalayim. For the people will dwell in Zion, which is Yerushalayim. Bachu lo sivkeh, that they're not going to have to weep. Chanon yachnecha l'kol zakecha. Hashem is going to grant you at the sound of your outcry. Kishmato anach. And when Hashem hears you, Hashem will answer you. So that is, again, highlighting that because we're talking about a situation where we might be crying, Hashem is going to listen. Uksiv basrei, v'nasan lachem Hashem lechem tsar umayim lachatz. And right afterwards, it explains, what does it mean that we're crying? We're crying because Hashem has given us meager bread and a little bit of water. So as a result, it highlights that we're talking about poverty. Okay, Rabbi Abahu Omer, masbiin oto miziv shchina, that somebody who's in that situation, who maintains the faith despite their poverty, so then Hashem will, give them from the splendor of Hashem's presence. That's how Hashem will give them what they need. Shne'amar v'hayu einecha ro'os es morecha, that your eyes are going to behold your teacher, and here your teacher is referring to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Rabbi Acha Bar Chanina said, Amar af ein hapargod nin al b'fanav, that even the curtain that separates God from everything is not going to be locked, meaning that your tefillot can go through. Shenemar lo yikanef od morecha, that Hashem, your teacher, is no longer going to cloak God's self. Okay, so that is that, and now we return back to our Mishnah. Our Mishnah had noted that after the Beit HaMikdash was destroyed, every day has a curse. And the Gemara now considers this. And I mentioned this concept in connection with the Dvar Torah that I shared this morning. It's a really important thing because we do some of these items every day. So let's take a look and see what it's talking about. So Rabbi Shimon ben Gamliel Omer Mishum Rabbi Yehoshua Miyom Shechar Beis HaMikdash Ein. There's no day it continues without a curse. And Amar Rava b'chol yom b'yom meruba kilalaso b'shel chavero. Every day the curse gets worse. Shenemar baboker tomar miyitain erev uve'erev tomar miyitain boker. Because in connection with the curses at the end of Sefer Dvarim, we say that in the morning we'll ask who is going to give, who's going to give the evening, meaning I wish it were evening. And in the evening, we're going to say who's going to give the morning, meaning I wish it was morning. And so how does that work? So hi boker, which morning are we talking about? Now, usually one understands this as the next morning, that God willing we'll have the next morning. But the Gemara is now highlighting that actually miyada my have. How do you know that you want tomorrow? Now, on the some level, it's about hope. That statement, and I'm hoping for tomorrow. But given that it's in the curses, the point is that actually hoping for tomorrow isn't necessarily going to be good because everything is just getting worse. So as a result, Ela Dechalef, it's the morning that's past, meaning in the moments of the curse, we'll all wish that it was either this morning or yesterday evening, because as bad as it was then, is better than it is now, highlighting the fact that every day the curse gets worse. Ve'ela alma amai kamakayim. Well, if that's the case, how does the world endure? Meaning, how could it be that we still have a world in which every day is worse than the day before? So akadusha desidra v'ayehe shmei rabba de agadita. So the Gemara answers that it's the kedusha that we say at the end of davening in Uvalat Tzion, that where and Rashi explains, where we not only say kedusha, not only declare God's holiness, but we also engage in learning of Torah, because we also explain the kedusha using Aramaic, which of course was for them, the English of the time. So they understood what was being said and they were learning it all together. And same with Agadita. The Agadita that is referred to here is when everybody would come together on Shabbos to listen to the rabbi to share some discussion of verses and the lessons that they have for our lives. And that's what we're talking about. And everybody enjoyed them. We have a general principle that people like learning stories. And it's true, people like learning stories. And that's what Agadita is all about, that we have an opportunity to learn from these stories that are in our Tanakh, that are in our tradition. And as a result, are able to, and that fact that the Jewish people comes together to learn Torah together, just as we are doing here, is coming together to learn Torah together. That is what enables the world to endure. Shneamar Eretz Afasa Kimo Ophel Salmaves Velo Sidarim. Right, the world is dark as the gloom of death's shadow for lack of orders. For lack of orders. And so what is orders? So yeshadarim tofiyah ma'ofel, that there are orders that will allow the world to emerge out of the gloom. And what orders are those? That is the orders of kedusha, the sidra, the kaddish, the kedusha that we say in Uvalat Zion, and the kaddish, the agadita, and the kaddish that's associated with teaching of Torah. All right, the lo yared tal livracha. Now we go back to the list of items in our Mishnah, and we say that it was no longer going to have dew descend as a blessing. V'nital tam peiros, and the fruit and the taste of fruit was removed. So focusing on this last one, Tanya Rabbi Shimon ben Elazar Omer tahara bitla tam v'reach, that the concept of tahara, when that was lost in the Jewish people, so that nullified the flavor and fragrance of items. So Maisa Bittel, Maser Bittel Shuman Dagan, and the stopping of tithing made the grain less delicious, less rich. Rav Huna Ashkach Tomarta. So we have now a story, Techinunata, that Rav Huna found this really creamy, date. It was probably, I can imagine it oozing out its honey. Shakla karcha besudare, and he took it and he put it into a piece of cloth, into his kerchief. Also Rabba Bray, but Amrlai. So his son Rabba, happened upon him, met him, and he says to him, Morchina reika dechinunisa. I smell this amazing creamy date. I don't understand how. Wow! And so Amrlai benita hariyeshbacha. Oh, you must have a sense of purity in you, because you're able to smell that when most people would not be able to smell it, because it's it's in my pocket, in my kerchief. So Yahava Nihale. So as a result, because it's his son, right? So Rav Huna's son is Rabbah. So Rav Huna gave to Rabbah, the date, so that he would be able to eat it. Adahachi asa Abba Bray. Well, Abba, who is Rabbah's son. So again, we have Rav Huna, then Rabbah, then Abba. And so Abba, Rabbah's son, happened to, again, came upon them. And Shakla Yahava Nihalai. And Rabbah took the date, this delicious date that his father had just given to him, and he gives it to Abba. So his Rabbah's to Rav Huna's grandson. So Amar Lei, Rav Huna said to Rabbah, B'ni simachta es libi v'hakesa es shinai, that on the one hand, you've gladdened my heart, but you've also dulled my teeth. Meaning that, and Rabbi Leibowitz explains that the literal interpretation of this is not to break teeth, which is often how we discuss it in the context of the Pesach Seder in connection with the Russia sun, but rather it's about your mouth watering without being satisfied. And so here, my mouth was watering, but I wasn't satisfied, because instead of giving to me the date, you gave it to my grandson. Meaning, instead, if you're not going to have it, you should give it back to me. But clearly, you love your son more than you love your father. So, again, you can have the same interpretation in connection with the Russia, that we're telling the Russia, that that we're going to have the Pesach Seder, but you're not going to be able to enjoy the Korban Pesach. You're going to watch us eat it because you aren't going to deserve. So Hainu de Amre in Sheet. Now, this whole concept people prefer their son to their father, that's consistent with the following statement. So Rachamei de Abba Abnei, Rachamei divnei Abnei de Havulei. So a father loves his son, but the son loves his own son. And so that's the story. So Rav Acha, and although Rachamei often means mercy, here Rashi explains that Rachamim means ahava, love. Okay, so Rav Acha, and of course they come from the same. The idea is from the same source. So Rav Acha bar Yaakov itapel bei berav Yaakov bar brate. So Rav Acha bar Yaakov happened to be raising his grandson, his daughter's son. So Rav Yaakov, he gadol amar le ashkian maya. When Rav Yaakov was a little bit older, his father said to him, "Listen, could you get me some water?" Amar lo labrech ana. I'm not your son. Again, highlighting the fact that a son and a grandson are a little different. So v'hainu damri inshi Rave bar bartach ana. That raise me, but then I'm going to tell you I'm not actually your son. I'm your daughter's son. So the point is that we have to recognize that first of all, we should there's an aspect of kibud av even for a grandparent, and we should recognize that of course that the relationship between a parent and child is a different relationship than a grandparent and grandchild. Okay, so that brings us to the next Mishnah. And in the last Mishnah, we talked about what was lost with the destruction of the Beit HaMikdash. So this Mishnah opens with additional details of a series of decrees that happened at that time. So let's take a look. So, Bifulmus shall Aspasianos, that when it was Vespasian's siege against Jerusalem, Gazru al Atros Chasanim, because of the sadness of the time, they decreed a ban on the wreath that grooms would wear at a wedding. The al ha'irus, and they also decreed on the irus, which we'll explain is a musical instrument, and we'll explain what it is shortly. Befulmus shaltitus, and then when it was Titus's campaign, Gazru al Atros Kalos, they even said that they were going to ban the sort of the crowns of brides. V'shelo yelamed adam es beno Yavanis, and you shouldn't teach your children Greek. But Pulmos ha'acharon, when it was the final campaign, Gazur shelo teitze akala ba'apirion b'socha'ir, that they shouldn't go use a canopy to protect them, as they went through the city. V'rabosenu hitiru sheteitze kakala ba'apirion b'socha'ir. But then eventually the rabbis undid that and allowed the bride to go through the city in a canopy. So Mishnah Mesra, and now we're going to, so having dealt with that, we talked about qualities that disappeared upon the death of certain tzaddikim, a certain tanoim, and so now we continue that list. Mishnah Mesra Rabbi Meir bat Lumosh Levi Mashalim. So when Rabbi Meir died, so then there stopped being people who created parables. Mishnah Meis ben Azai badlu hashakdanim. When Ben Azai died, so then people who were diligent stopped. Mishnah Meis ben Zoma badlu hadarshanim. When Ben Zoma died, so then there were no longer people who were exegetes who would be able to derive things from the Torah. Mishnah Meis Rabbi Akiva batal kavod haTorah. When Rabbi Akiva died, the glory of Torah died with him. Mishnah Meis Rabbi Chanina ben Dosa batlu anshe masa. When Rabbi Chanina ben Dosa died, so then there stopped being people of action. Mishnah Meis Rabbi Yosei Katonta Pascha Chasidim. When Rabbi Yossi Katonta died, so then there were no longer any Chasidim, people who were particularly pious. Vilama Nikra Shemo Katonta, Shaya Katonta Shal Chasidim, and he was specifically referred to as Katonta because he was the least of the pious people. That's why when he died, there was nothing left of them. Mishemes Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai Batal Ziv HaChachma. When Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai died, so then the splendor of glory, the splendor of wisdom died. Mishemes Rabbi Gamliel Hazaken Batal Kavoda Torah. The honor of Torah died with it. Umesa Tahara Ufrishus, and similarly purity and separation died with it. with him. Mishemes Rabbi Yishmael ben Pavi, but Laziv HaKahuna. When Rabbi Yishmael ben Pavi died, so now the splendor of the Kahuna died with him. So Mishemes Rebbe Batal Anava V'Yiraschet. And when Rebbe died, humility and fear of sin died with him. Now the next, so that is that list. Now what follows is not clear whether it's from a Mishnah or from a Brisa, but it certainly continues along the same theme. And basically some of the commentaries did not comment on it, suggesting that it was not part of the Mishnah, some of the Mishnaic commentaries, but at the same time, the Mishnah, when we look at Maseches Sotah in Yerushalmi, it is included. So there's a lack of clarity as to whether or not this should be part of the Mishnah. So if it's part of the Mishnah, we would not say the words Tana Rabbanan, because that would indicate it's the Gemara and it's part of a Brisa. But if, or alternatively, we can just continue. So in any event, Rabbi Pinchas, so what is this Brisa or Mishnah continuation say? Rabbi Pinchas ben Yair Omer, when Rabbi Pinchas ben Yair says, Mishachara Beis HaMikdash Boshu Chaverim Uvnei Chorin, that when the Beis HaMikdash was destroyed, Chaverim and highborn, and free men have been ashamed, meaning that they don't, that v'chafu rosham, and their heads have been covered. And so, they're all embarrassed by the fact that we lack the Beit HaMikdash. The idea is that, any time that the Beit HaMikdash was not built in our days, so we should treat it as if we were deserving of its destruction. V'nidaldalu anshe masa, and people of merit have become poor. The gavru ba'alei zroa u'ba'alei lashon. And on the other hand, the wicked, these strong men, people who use force and people who speak lashon hara and speak slander, they have gained strength. They have become victorious. Ve'ein dorish, ve'ein mevakesh, ve'ein shoel. And there's no one to ask, to request, to help, to any kind of these different kinds of questions. And therefore, al mi lanu lahisha'ein, who do we have to rely on? Al avinu shabashamayim. We only have our Father in heaven. We have to rely on Hashem. So Rabbi Eliezer Agadol says, Miyom shecharav Beis Hamikdash sharu chakimaya lemeheve kivsafraya, that everybody went down a level. So people who were chachamim, the people who were very knowledgeable, they became like school teachers. The safraya, those who taught books, Chazanya, they became like people who were in the synagogue. Chazanya ka'amada'ara, and the people who were, the leaders of the synagogues, they became like regular people. Va'amada'ara, as we turn to Memtet Amabet, Azlo v'daldala, they became even worse and more poor. V'ein shoel v'ein mevakesh, and so there's nobody to ask about. We just have to rely on Hashem in heaven.
In order of wealth or learning?
This is about learning. They become more poor in their learning, and they're presumably they're observing of mitzvot. Okay. Okay. So beikvus Mashiach chutzpah yiska, that when we have this the beginning of the Mashiach time, then chutzpah is going to increase. V'yoker yahamir, and prices will rise. Hagefen titain pirya v'hayayim b'yoker, and yet there will be plenty of grapes, and yet people are so the price of wine will be will go up. And as Rashi explains, second line, shakol oskin mishtaos, because everybody's involved in drinking in drinking parties. So
Like that?
yeah, it does sound a little like now. So hopefully this is the Mashiach. That would be wonderful. So okay, umalchus ta'afech leminus ve'ein tochachas, and the government's going to turn to heresy, and there's not going to be anyone to engage in rebuke or to listen to rebuke. If beis vad yeliznus, the meeting place of the of where people would ordinarily learn Torah is going to be used for improper behavior, for znus. V'hagalil yecherav v'hagavlan yishom, and the Galil will be destroyed and Gavlan will be desolated. But Anshe Hagavul, and people who live on the border of Israel, Yusovavu me'ir le'ir, they're going to go around from town to town, below Yechonanu, and nobody's going to have mercy on them to give them food to eat. V'chachmos sofrim tisarach, and the wisdom of scribes is going to become putrid, to become to decay. V'yirei chet yimasu, and those who fear sin will be despised. V'ha'amis tehei nederes, and there will be missing will be the truth. Na'arim pnei zakenim yalbinu, youths will embarrass their elders. Zakenim yamdu mipnei ketanim, and the elders will need to get up for minors. Bain Menavel Av, and now we cite a verse that highlights this. This is a verse in Micha. The son makes fun of the father. Bas Kama Be'ima, the daughter gets up in front of against the mother. Kala Bechamosa, a daughter-in-law against the mother-in-law. Oive Ish Anshe Beito, the man's enemies are the people of his own house. Pnei Hador Kifnei Hakelev, and the face of the generation will be like the face of a dog, meaning that nobody will have any same sense of embarrassment. As just as a dog isn't embarrassed to do things publicly, so too people will not be embarrassed. Habein einu misbayesh me'aviv, a son is not going to be embarrassed in front of his father. Alma yesh lanu lahisha'ein alavinu shabashamayim. So on whom can we lean? Only on Hashem in heaven. And it's interesting, actually, it occurs to me, although I did not specifically look into this and haven't heard anything about it, it's interesting, right? We began by saying, Ein Doresh, Ein Mevakesh, Ein Shoel. There's nobody who's going to seek, search, or inquire. And then the second time we referenced just Shoel Umevakesh. We didn't no longer had the Doresh. And now we don't even have that. We don't even know on some level. It's not just that we don't ask the questions, we don't even know the questions to ask. So, God willing, it does seem on some level that many of these aspects seem to be consistent with what's going on in the world today. So hopefully, in fact, we are on the eve of the Mashiach coming. So, all right, so now let's jump into the Gemara, at least the real Gemara. Everybody agrees that this is the Gemara. So, Amara, Lo Shanu Elashel Melach Begafras. When we talked about the crowns, that we're talking about the crowns of these wreaths made from salt and sulfur, i.e. stones, that would look beautiful. So aval yishal hadas v'shal vered mutar. But if you were to use a wreath with myrtle or rose, so that would be fine. Ushmuel Omar af yesh af shel hadas v'shal vered asur. Shmuel says no. The plant-based wreaths that have flowers on them are also going to be prohibited. Only if you use like reeds or rushes from the side of the water, that'll be permitted because that's going to be much less attractive. The Levi Amar Afshal Kanim V'Shel Chelas Asur, all of them are prohibited. V'chein Tani Levi V'Misnise, in he's reference to a brisa, Afshal Kanim V'Shel Chelas Asur. All different kinds of wreaths are prohibited. Can't have any kind of crown. Va'al ha'irus. So what was this irus? That's the musical instrument. So what? No, I don't think we certainly don't. The bottom line is that even to the extent that we don't hold of that, and I don't think we do, because otherwise, one could call, people put on a hat. Some people put on a hat at the wedding, tiara, etc. I don't think we hold of this. Of course, this is referring to the man's wreath. We'll talk about the woman's wreath in a moment. But in any event, what we do still hold is that the bride and groom are like a king and queen, and so that is still true, even if we don't have them wear a crown. Bala irus. So what was this irus thing? So my irus, Amar Rabbi Elazar Tavla Dechad Puma. It's a it's a tavla, like so there are a number of different ways that one can interpret it. So it says here a bell with one clapper, but we'll see in a moment that it makes much more sense to understand it as a one-sided drum. That it's basically, if you imagine a hollow item with it covered on one side. And okay, so Rabba bar Rav Huna Abba le livrei tanbura. So Rabba, the son of Rav Huna, who by the way we just mentioned a few minutes ago as the one who gave his son Abba the date, right? The date that he himself got from his father Rav Huna. So Rabba bar Rav Huna Abba le livrei tanbura. So he made a tanbura because his son was getting married. And so what's a tanbura? A tanbura here they translate it as a tambourine. Exactly. Asa avua tavre, and so his father came and he broke it. So Amr le michalef lebitavla dechad puma, that the tambourine is too similar to this one-sided tavla, and again, what we're calling the irus. And so as a result, that's why you shouldn't do it. So what should you do instead? Zil avidle apuma dechatzpa. Don't put it over a hollow thing. Put it over an urn, or the opening of an urn, o apuma de kaviza, or against the mouth of a pitcher, meaning that you can have a drum, but you should have a drum that has a base to it and isn't hollow, presumably because it makes a much more powerful sound when you have a snare drum that you beat that is hollow on one side. So that was what occurred to me also. So all right, befumus shel Titus gazru al atros kala. So again, then when Titus engaged in his attacks on Yerushalayim, so they banned the wreaths of bride. So my atros kalos, what are those kinds of wreaths? What are those kinds of crowns? Amar Rabbi Bar Bar Chana, Amar Rabbi Yochanan, Ir shel zahav. It's a Ir shel zahav, and we've found elsewhere in connection with the Yerushalayim shel zahav that it's a kind of crown that is made out of gold and has ridges to it, so it looks like it's the walls of the city of Yerushalayim. So Tanya Nami and we have a brisa, Ezu Atros Kalos Ir Shel Zahav, Aval Osa Kipa Shel Melas. But you can have sort of an ornamental, some kind of other kind of cap made of wool or whatever. The bottom line is that I don't know whether there's some reason that we shouldn't do a gold crown, but obviously, yeah, well, that may be the reason in of itself. But okay, so Tana, then we had this whole canopy thing. Af al chupas chasanim gazru. Now, but at the end, so my chupas chasanim, what is this groom canopy? So zahoris demushavos. So actually, this is not in our Mishnah. This is an additional rule. So we have a brisa that says that you shouldn't have a groom canopy. And what is a groom canopy? It's some kind of zahoris, red cloth, hamuzhavos, that has gold in it. Tanya namihachi, elu hein chupas chasanim, zahoris hamuzhavos. That it's this bridegroom, the groom canopy is something that has gold, red cloth with gold on it. Papyrus, but you can make a groom's canopy with lattice. And you can hang from it anything you want. So obviously, today we actually hang often they'll hang lots of flowers from the canopy. We said that you shouldn't teach your son Greek. So Tanrabanan, so now we're going to have the story. Why was it that Greek was prohibited? And we're going to see that it's not actually the language, but rather some chachma, some Greek wisdom that we're talking about. So when the Hashmonaim kings were besieging each other, so Haya Hyrcanus mibachutz, Hyrcanus was outside, but Aristobulus mivnim, and Aristobulus was inside the city of Yerushalayim. B'chol yom v'yom hayu mishalshalin dinarim bekupa. Every day they would lower some money down over the city wall, umalin lahem tamidim, and then in exchange the Hyrcanus group would actually give back some korbanot, some of the lambs for the daily sacrifice. Haya sham zakin echad. There was one old man, shahaya makir b'chachmas Yavanis, who understood Greek wisdom. Laz lahem b'chachmas Yavanis, and so he communicated with them using this Greek wisdom, which maybe it's its own language or it's some kind of knowledge. Amar lahen, and he said to them, Kol zman she'oskin ba'avoda ein nimsarin b'yadchem, as long as they are going to engage in the sacrifices, they're not going to, you're not going to be successful. They're still going to have hope. So l'machar shulshalu lahen dinarim b'kupa. So again, they lower down the dinarim in a bag, and v'helu lahem chazer. And instead of raising up sheep, they raised up a pig. Once the pig got halfway up the wall, it stuck its hoofs. V'nizdaza eretz Yisrael arba meos parsa, and the whole of Israel, 400 parsa square, shook. It's roughly a space of like 40,000 square miles. Osa Shah Amra, and in that moment they declared, Arur Adam Shi Gadol Chazirim. Cursed is anybody who raises pigs, and cursed is anybody who teaches their son Greek wisdom. And it was in that year that we learned the following: Masa. It was the following happened: Uva Omer Migagos Srifim, that the Omer, rather than coming from someplace close to Yerushalayim, ended up coming from Gagos Trifin, Ushtei Alechem and Bikas Ein Socher, and the Shtei Alechem, the two breads that were brought, did not come from anywhere nearby. They came from Ein Socher. The idea is that although these are supposed to come from nearby, because of the destruction that happened, it couldn't. There wasn't anything there. So okay. So now as we continue, Aini. Is it really true that you can't teach your son Greek? Don't we have the following statement? Rebbe said the following: why does anybody speak Sursi in the land of Israel? Because Ella Ilashon Kodesh, Ilashon Yavanis, either speak Hebrew or speak Greek, because those are the people who are in charge. So Va'amar Rav Yosef B'Vavel Lashon Arami Lama, and similarly Rav Yosef said, why learn Aramaic in Bavel? You should learn a different language. Ella Olashon Kodesh, Olashon Parsi. You should either learn, Hebrew or Persian. The bottom line is you should learn the language of either Hebrew or the language of your relevant government. Lashon Yuvanit L'chud. So in second, but the bottom line is that Rebbe seems to say that speaking Greek is fine. So Lashon Yavanis L'chud v'chachmas Yavanis L'chud. There's a difference between Greek as a language and Greek wisdom. It's only this Greek wisdom that's prohibited. Chachmas Yavanis mi'asiru. 1 second, is Greek wisdom really prohibited? V'hamar Rav Yehuda Amar Shmuel Mishum Rabban Shimon ben Gamliel. Rav Yehuda said that Shmuel reported in the name of Rav Shimon ben Gamliel, my dixiv eini ola l'nafshi mikol benos iri. What does it mean when it says my eye has grown ugly on account of me, more so than all of the daughters in my city? So it explains it's a reference. This is a pasuk in Eicha, and this is a reference to the following story. Elav Yeladim Hayu Beves Abba. There were 1,000 students in my father's house. This is again Rabbi Gamliel's house, because this is Rabbi Shimon ben Gamliel who's talking. And what would they be doing? Chamesh meos lamdu Torah v'chamesh meos lamdu chachmas Yavanis. 500 would be learning Torah and 500 would be studying Greek wisdom. V'lo nishtayer mehen ela ani kan uven achi abba ba'asya. And the only two people that have survived from that 1,000 are me and my cousin, namely the son of my father's brother, who lives in Asya. And so the point is that the point that he's making is how terrible that is, that everybody has been killed. But the key point from the Gemara's perspective is that we see that people were learning intentionally Chachmas Yavanis. So shiny shall base Rabban Gamliel. So the Rabban Gamliel's house is different. To Kurobin Lamalkos level, because they had to be close to the leadership. They had to be close to the government, the kingship. The Tanya Misaper, and now we have a brisa that highlights this concept that sometimes things are permitted when you are dealing with government that might not be permitted ordinarily. So Misaper Komi Hare Zet Midarche Ha'amori. If you use the Komi haircut, that is not a good thing. That's the way the Amorites, the Amorim the Emorim would behave. Avtolos ben Ruvain Hidziru Lasaper Komi, but Avtolos was allowed to have this kind of haircut. Shehu Karav Lamalchus, because he needed to be near the kingship, so he needed to be in the seat of government. Shall base Rabban Gamliel Hetiru Lahen Chalcham Asibanis, and similarly, the house of Rabbi Gamliel was allowed to learn the wisdom of Yavanis, because again, they were close to the government. All right, so now our Mishnah mentioned that the bride was not allowed to be taken out in the canopy in the city. So my time, what is the reason that the rabbis changed it and allowed it later? Mishum Tzniusa, because they didn't want everybody to be staring at the bride, that this way the bride would have some sense of modesty and privacy by being going out in to the wedding hall in the canopy. Mishameis Rabbi Yochanan, and now we conclude with the reminder of additional items of people whose of losses associated with the death of certain people. So Mishameis Rabbi Yochanan Batla Chachma. So when Rabbi Yochanan died, the wisdom died with it. Okay, so Tana Rabbanan. So we have a brisa that teaches some additional points. Mishameis Rabbi Eliezer Nignas Sefer Torah. When Rabbi Eliezer died, it was as if a Torah scroll was buried with him because he was like the source of a Torah scroll. Mishameis Rabbi Yoshua Batla Eitza Machshava. When Rabbi Yoshua died, so then a good advice and planning died. Mishameis Rabbi Akiva Batlu Zroe Torah. When Rabbi Akiva died, so the supports of Torah died. Mishanis Tatmu Mainos HaChachma, and the well springs of wisdom were plugged up. Mishameis Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah Batlu Atros Chachma. When Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah died, so then the crown of wisdom died. Misha Sha'ateres Chachamim Ashram, that the wealth of wise men is their crown, namely the crown of Torah. Mishameis Rabbi Chanina ben Dosa Batlu Anshe Masa, as we said in our Mishnah, when Rabbi Chanina ben Dosa died, so then men of action died with him. And of course, this reminds us of the many stories that we have of Rabbi Chanina ben Dosa saving people and being there to rescue people from snakes and the like. Mishameis Abba Yossi ben Ketanta. When Abba Yossi ben Katonta died, Batlu Chasidim, so then the Chasidim died. Bilama Nikra Shemo Abba Yossi ben Katonta, and then here on a similar language to the language in our Mishnah, which was just Rabbi Yossi Katonta. So here Abba Yossi ben Katonta, so he was called that Shahaya Mikitane Chasidim because he was one of the least of the pious men, but yet he was still a pious man, and that was it for the pious men when he died. Mishameis ben Azai Batlu Hashakdanim. When Ben Azai died, so then there stopped being diligent students. Mishameis ben Zoma Batlu Hadarshanim. When Ben Zoma died, there stopped being people who were experts in deriving things from the Torah. Mishameis Rabbi Shimon ben Gamliel. When Rabbi Shimon ben Gamliel died, Allah Gova'ai V'Rabu Saros. So locusts swarmed, and the problems, the pains, they multiplied. Mishameis Rebbe Hukblu Tsaros. And when Rebbe died, so then again they got doubled again. So now we conclude Mishameis Rebbe Badla Anava V'Yiras Chetz. We said in our Mishnah that when Rebbe died, humility died with him, as well as fear of sin. So Amar Lei Rabbi Yosef Latana. Rabbi Yosef said to the one who was teaching this, Lo Tisnei Anava. Don't say that humility died to Ika Ana, because I am still around. And Amarle Rav Nachman Latana. Rav Nachman said to the Tana, Lo Tisnei Yiras Chetz Ika Ana, and don't say that there's no more fear of sin because I am around. Of course, it's interesting, and it highlights that there's a difference between humility and honesty, and humility and being, falsely humble, and understanding what humility really is and what it isn't. Knowing what you're able to do but also recognizing the role that Hashem plays in everything that you do. That is what true humility is all about. And so may we also be able to have that. And so we say, Hadron Allah. Egla Arufa, Salika La Masecha Sotah, Hadron Allah Egla Marufa, Salika La Masecha Sotah, Hadron Allah Egla Arufa, Salika La Masechet Sotah. And God willing, tomorrow we will jump right into Masechet Gittin.
Thank you so much.
Have a wonderful, wonderful day. A pleasure to learn with all of you. I'm sorry that I didn't scroll. Let me scroll the screen. I'll leave the screen open up. Yeah, it goes fast. Goes fast.
Okay, have a great day.
Have a wonderful, wonderful day. Looking forward to continuing to learn together. And again, a mazel tov, Moshe. We look forward to learning your grandson's name. May you share that bismano.
I'll know it's Sunday after the bris in Lakewood.
Awesome. Looking forward to hearing. Be well. I'll note it now, but next Wednesday, we will be learning on Zoom only. I'm going to be Zooming from Boston, but so we should be able to learn, but I will be on Zoom only. All right.
What day you be back?
I'll be back on Thursday. So Thursday morning, we'll be back. All right, which is Erev Shavuos. So, all right, have a great day, everybody. Be well.
It's gonna be a nice next Friday.
Oh, awesome. I'm so glad to hear.